Hey guys, Batwoman. Here, I've picked up the Francavilla issue a little while ago. But anyway, I wanted to jump in on current events, so to speak, things that are on the internet right now, people complaining about them, talking about them. One of which is Williams and J.H. Williams, the wonderful artist, and his co-writer Blackman leaving the Batwoman comic book, and controversy surrounding that. I actually have a whole list of little vlog topics I now want to do. When I started this countdown, I just figured, I'll just think of something to talk about. And it has been useful to collect little themes. So now I have lots of ideas of what to do, but I figured I would just sort of bounce off of my, or have my thoughts bounce off of some of these controversies that have been going on. The big one that the press picked up on is that DC won't let their gay character get married, which I think the press, with all of these things, like with Orson Scott Card on Superman, or the Harley Quinn thing, being naked in the bathtub while trying to commit suicide, the press loves these things that make the comic book world look backward, or look regressive, because secretly the larger world wants to think badly of people who produce comic books and people who read them. So when they get these little snippets, they run with them and they turn them into headlines, and ooh, everyone can say how bad people are. There was actually a great video about a number of these things by, what's her name? ThinkAbouttheInk. I can't remember her name. She's also the author of Superbia. But anyway, Grace Randolph. She did a great video about all of this. And anyway, bouncing off that, I was just thinking how I think the press loves it when comic books seem bad. But probably the real issue in terms of how comic books are done is how the editors treated these writers. Not that they told them to change things, but that they told them at the last minute that they knew they'd been spinning out these plans for years, and then suddenly pull reversals on them, and apparently not done them in a very diplomatic way. Because anyone working for a big company obviously has to work with the system, but the system should treat them well while they're working with them, and it seems like DC's not. But one of the issues that came out, the real reason she can't get married, is there's a policy at DC that none of their characters can get married. And part of me said, oh, maybe that's a smart policy, because I wasn't too keen about Superman being married or Spider-Man being married. I know some people, like I've heard Matt, Agent 42Q, talking about this already with Oddfellow Thoughts. When he came in, both those characters were married. And to him, that's the norm, the status quo. So, for me, they were always all unmarried. I can imagine in the DC editorial meetings when they're setting these policies that they felt in general they wanted to make their comics more approachable, more easy to sell to young people, just easier for people to jump on them. And it's harder perhaps for older readers, like me, to come on and see that these characters who were always single are suddenly married. And it's hard, they're imagining it's harder for young people to come along and relate to characters who are, deep into marital issues. But it shows all of this backlash, and when you think about this character in particular, that while company-wide decisions sound like good decisions, from a sort of business and let's keep this vital kind of creative point of view, they don't work when you, or they're a mistake to provide, to be a blanket kind of situation. For me, for instance, Animal Man, it was one of the most interesting DC comics, because not only is he married, but he has children, and he's dealing with all of that. And that makes life very complicated. I think more than being married, having children, because I was married for quite a while without children, and I lived singly without children for a long time. I only had one child, which is relatively, you know, it's not like having 4 children, like a comic book mom and Rorschach. It's relatively easier than some people's family lives. But still, any children in your life, it changes. And I know it's a cliche, but it's very different. So superheroes with children would be quite interesting to me, as is Animal Man. It seems like they never really... Well, in the Fantastic Fours that deal with the fact that they have children, the ones that I've read, I haven't seen them deal with it in terribly interesting ways. The children and the relationship with their parents don't feel that real to me. But those are the two I can think of with children. A while back, after having children myself and suddenly realizing what a big deal it is, I mean, I paid lip service to the idea that it was a big deal when I was a long-term childless adult. But anyway, suddenly when that happened, I started asking myself, oh, wait a minute, are there any great works of literature? I wasn't thinking about comic books at the time. I think I was talking with my literary friends. Are there any great works of literature that are about this time of life, this struggle with children and the change that happens in your marriage, the change that happens in your whole life and your whole perspective on everything? I can't recall, Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Faulkner. I don't recall, those kinds of stuff you would have to read in English classes. They don't. Even though that's like one of the biggest parts of adult life for many, many people, having children and being married and then having children, or not being married and then having children, or having a relationship and having children enter into that. I can't think of anything. There's novels that are about families from the children's point of view, in terms of literary novels. And I can't think of, I'm sure there are, but I can't think of pop novels, for lack of a better word, which I actually like better than literary novels most of the time, that deal with that either. The main thing that seems to deal with family is, in terms of art, entertainment, is sitcoms, and perhaps some comedy movies deal with family. And I guess, for a while there were those kind of family soap opera 1-hour dramas on TV. There was one even called Family, I think. What's it called that? With Christy McNichol back in the 70s. And there may be ones now, since I'm hardly watching any TV anymore. But anyway, so it seems like that's a really important part of life. Now I can see why you wouldn't want too many comics like that. I mean, everyone's already worrying that younger people aren't reading comics. So if you made all comics about superheroes taking care of their children and dealing with the stuff that Animal Man deals with, it's great for me, but it may not be great for everybody. But I think that DC made a decision that made a certain amount of sense, but then if you look at it closer, and certainly if you've made these broad decisions and you're really going to stick with them, tell your creators early on as they're setting up relationships. Now maybe the creators of Batwoman weren't clear to their editors where they're going. I have to assume they probably were. So it seems like the fault of the management. And maybe the editors, working closely with Batwoman, were only told later on by the higher up people that this is a hard and fast policy. And it's because it sounds like there's a general thing of last-minute changes and people, you know, having ideas accepted and then rejected, which kind of implies stuff happening from above, as has been discussed by several of us before, probably most eloquently by Oddfellow Thoughts that I know of. In any case, I think it would be great in literature in general, comic books, popular literature, high art literature, to see more people exploring life in marriage, and even more so marriage or relationships with children. Maybe because I'm just in the thick of it, but you know, now that I'm in the thick of it, I'm realizing this is what most people have gone through. I'm amazed that there isn't more storytelling on those subjects. But you could also, there's all kinds of things. You know, she could get married and then have her bride get killed. Of course, then the press will be, oh, as soon as a lesbian gets married, we have to kill off her wife. But there's certainly an aspect of storytelling where you can't make things, to have an ongoing drama about a character, you can't make them be happy for very long at all. You have to always cut it out. My favorite example is with Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She finally gets to consummate her love with Angel, and then he turns evil. She can't have more than a moment of happiness with him before it's totally effed up. And that's brilliant storytelling. You suck the audience in, they really want this happy moment, and then you rip it away from them. But it's a very simplified solution to say no one gets married. But you do have to maybe look closely at it. Is when this person gets married, what is it going to do to their life? What are the dramatic implications? How are we going to keep this character unhappy? They do have to be unhappy. That's not just DC being grim and gritty. Long before there was grim and grittiness, any stories that you cared about, the characters were not happy. Peter Parker has been unhappy since the very beginning, you know. And maybe that's why those seemed like better stories than the DC of the early Silver Age, where they didn't really want to make the characters unhappy. So they had to do imaginary stories where bad things happened to them, where Superman suddenly got really fat or something. But since that beginning of the Marvel age, the characters have to be unhappy. That's where you get those kind of stories. So I'm not one saying, oh, can't you let these characters be happy? Because you can't let those characters be happy. No, not for more than an issue or two. On the Harley Quinn thing, I guess, you know, Grace Randolph in her video said it far better than anything I could say, but her main point was really apt. It was, what's been disturbing about Harley Quinn of late is the hypersexualizing of someone who's mentally ill. And this idea of her naked committing suicide, even though it turns out to be a dream sequence and everything, that was kind of an apotheosis, can't say that word. It was kind of a peak moment of that kind of perhaps misguided playing on a mentally ill person's unhappiness and sexualizing it at the same time. So, like, when you sexualize characters like that, I think that may be another thing that there might have been a DC policy about, because it seemed like a lot of characters were extra sexualized with the New 52. There was a lot of complaining about that when that first started, and maybe they pulled back a little bit on it, or maybe people just got used to it. But you have to think about what the results of it are. For instance, the hypersexualization of Starfire, for me, is a great shame, because when we look at kid-friendly material for my daughter, Starfire is immediately her favorite character when you look at the DC female characters. You know, like on Teen Titans Go or things like that, or the Tiny Titans, where Starfire appears. She's just a very appealing character to a girl, but this hypersexualized Starfire takes her away, I think, from the girl. In fact, I associate that people who are upset at the new look of Lobo, which I think is a dumb look, but part of the problem with that look for a male Lobo fan is Lobo's being made sexy, and you're just not as comfortable grooving to this sexy male character. He looks, like a pouty prince kind of character. Someone called him a lipstick Lobo or whatever. And you could say people are upset because they're feeling homophobic. That was implied somewhere. But I think men who may be upset by something like Lobo might think about that when they want to sexualize a female character. For some characters that might be just right, but it doesn't feel like it's right for Harley Quinn. It didn't feel like it was, or felt like it was a little off the way they handled Catwoman. Anyway, so context. Let's sexualize a lot of our characters, and let's not let anyone get married, period, is a bad way to go. You got to think about it piece by piece. So, and that's what the bad editorial behavior is, sort of an internal management kind of thing, but the treatment of characters rather than creators is a public issue, or a thing of public concern for all of us that we reflect upon. I guess I'll stop it there. I thought there was another related issue to all of this that I wanted to talk about. I do have to say, I read those descriptions of Harley Quinn, and my first thought is, this stuff is crazy. I would have a really hard time drawing it if I was an artist, but an artist friend didn't seem intimidated by it and was going to take a shot at it. Of like Harley Quinn running through a swamp full of alligators wearing a chicken outfit, or an outfit made out of raw chickens. It just seems hard to draw it well. But that's a whole nother thing. I don't know if I want to read the new Harley Quinn. I want a fun character, but do I want a sort of breaks the fourth wall and perhaps plays the sexual jokiness? I don't know if I'm comfortable with that, or in terms of a character I want to enjoy. I'll probably pick up the first issue or two of Harley Quinn and give it a shot, though, because they may have all kinds of interesting ideas to go with that. Okay, talk to you guys later. Bye bye.